going to tell you a few things about my favorite of all of Sturges's films, The Lady Eve. I could start the story in Los Angeles in 1939, when Sturges was the top screenwriter under contract to Paramount. One evening, he invited the studio's head of production to dinner at his house. This was a regular occurrence, and resumed his years-long campaign to persuade him to allow Sturges to direct one of his original screenplays. This time, the head of production gave in. Over the next 4 years, Sturges directed 8 films for Paramount, all from scripts that he alone had written. But I'm not going to start there. Forget I told you any of that. I'm going to start in London in 1728. That was the year of the premiere of John Gay's play, The Beggar's Opera, a sensation in its own time and a recurring hit all the way through the 20th century, when Brecht and Weill adopted it as the three-penny opera. More than anyone else, John Gay gave English language drama the trick of reversing accepted values. In his play, the tunes of popular ballads replace operatic arias. The tragic hero is a low-life robber and murderer, and the faithful heroine is the daughter of his fence. The play was so popular that William Hogarth took advantage of the demand by painting multiple versions of the pivotal scene, which you see here, where the imprisoned hero stands between his 2 wives, both of whom are pleading for the law to spare him. But here's the thing about John Gay's reversal of values. It's ironic. The audience laughs in the security of knowing that robbery and prostitution are virtues only in the funhouse mirror of the play. This is where Sturges comes in. He is genuinely on the side of the crooks. Now, Sturges's movies stand out in many ways. Their dialogue is arguably the most brilliant that's ever been written for film. And Sturges spritzed it everywhere, to use his own term, so that all his characters talked funny. Other characteristics are his breathless pace, the way he mixes extraordinary sophistication with lavish slapstick, and his reliance on a group of mostly middle-aged and old bit players that he picked up here and there on the Paramount lot and turned into his stock company. You see the same faces over and over in Sturges's movies. They are as important to him as the work of the production designer. They form a kind of human landscape in his films. And then there's Sturges's reversal of accepted values, which in his case is not so ironic. His values, to a remarkable extent, are those of the crooks. You see that clearly in this evening's film, The Lady Eve, which contains the line of dialogue that gave my book its title. Let us be crooked, but never common. The uncommon crook with whom Sturges emphatically sides is Jean Harrington, a traveling card sharp and con artist who bamboozles a stuck-up rich boy named Charles Pike, and then to her sorrow can't resist falling in love with him. As she does so, she speaks the lines that might as well be Sturges's credo as an artist. You see, she tells Charles, you don't know very much about girls. The best ones aren't as good as you probably think they are. The bad ones aren't as bad, not nearly as bad. So who is Jean Harrington? Other than Barbara Stanwyck, of course, in top form as one of the strongest and smartest of Preston Sturges's string of smart, strong, willful heroines. Who is she that she could offer Charles and the audience such worldly wisdom? Is she really the daughter of the man who calls himself Colonel Harrington? Maybe. Is her name really Jean Harrington? She must use dozens of names. And actually, we find out that she does use dozens of names. We see her make up another one in the second half of the movie, along with a complete identity to go with it. But the biggest mystery is her relationship to the book of Genesis. Anyone can easily see that Sturges mapped the early scenes of The Lady Eve on the story of the Garden of Eden. And in case anybody was obtuse about the references, Paramount pointed them out on this poster, just to be helpful. At the start of the movie, Charles Pike emerges from the unspoiled paradise of the jungle, bearing a snake in a box, and Jean clunks him on the head with an apple. Very soon after, Charles falls. Hard. So Jean must be the Eve of the story. But she doesn't turn into a character called Eve until the second half of the movie. And by that point, most of the biblical parallels have dropped away. So why is there a shift? This always puzzled me from the first time I saw the movie. And if Jean becomes Eve only later, then who is she at the start in biblical terms? I'm going to tell you because as far as I'm concerned, there are no spoilers for movies more than 80 years old. People in the front row, I'm sorry about that. Nor do I want to withhold one of the movie's more interesting discoveries I made in writing my book. This revelation is yours free as a patron of BAMFA. According to a legend found nowhere in the Bible, Adam had a mate before Eve was created, just as Charles initially has Jean. This first woman's name was Lilith. She was innocently and joyfully amoral, and so she differed from the later temptress Eve. Although discussions about her were confined for a long period to Jewish literature, European writers and painters in the 19th century began to take an interest in Lilith and to elaborate on her image. She was said to be proud of her hair, which flowed loosely over her shoulders like Jean's in the movie, rather than being put up like Eve's. And she enjoyed looking into mirrors. Did Sturges know about the legend of Lilith? My research shows that in the 1920s, when Sturges was coming into his own as a playwright, he started as a Broadway playwright, Lilith's name kept popping up in novels and magazine articles. He also could have seen this picture titled Lady Lilith by the pre-Raphaelite artist Dante Gabriel Rossetti. The original painting was in a private collection. Right now it's in the Delaware Museum of Art. But this print by Rossetti is in the collection of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and it was in the city at the same time as Sturges. So here is Lilith with her long hair, staring into a mirror as she dreams of entangling men. And here is Jean Harrington with her long hair, staring into a mirror as she plots to entangle Charles. Not that Sturges wanted to tell anybody he thought of Barbara Stanwyck in the first half of the movie as Lilith, and in the second half as Eve. In Hollywood, during the studio era, you did not say out loud that you were an artist, and you did not own up to having any ideas of the sort that Sturges himself used to call deep dish. But here she is, the loving, if entirely amoral Lilith, who later, in spite and rancor, will turn herself into the vengeful Eve. Here she is as Eve, with her hair up, already teasing the poor sap with a little bestiality. Pretty soon, she will bring her cold, nasty snake of a man down, not playfully, by clunking him on the head with a half-eaten apple, but right down into the mud on his belly like the serpent. If you want clinching evidence, here it is. Sturges began writing The Lady Eve when a Paramount producer assigned him to make a screenplay out of a story the studio had bought by a writer named Monkton Hoff. This was before Sturges was allowed to direct. You'll see Hoff's name in the credits, but you won't find any of his work in the movie. Sturges proceeded, as he usually did, by tossing out everything in the original and starting over. He would keep only a detail here and there. The detail from Hoff's story that Sturges retained was the premise of two sisters, one good, one not so good, whose names were Salome and Sheba, two biblical names. But in The Lady Eve, as William Demarest says at the end, there aren't two sisters, it's positively the same dame. But she too has a biblical name, Eve, and I think her twin biblical name is Lilith. Now I turn the movie over to you to enjoy. It's an immense privilege to share just a molecule's worth of Preston Sturges' glory by presenting it to you. Thank you very much for being here to receive it.